everyone, this is Katie with Katie Loves Classic Books, and I'm here today with my July wrap-up. I thought about including August in this wrap-up as well, but there's kind of a week left of August, and I'm reading another book. It's really long, so I probably won't finish it, but I'll just do a separate wrap-up for August. Anyway, so, let's talk about the books I read in July. So the first book I read in July was Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb, and this was published in 2003. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads if you want like some sort of star rating. Everyone's big on that over there. So this is the third book in a fantasy trilogy called the Tawny Man trilogy, which is really the third trilogy in like this larger series called The Realm of the Elderlings. And I absolutely love this series so far, and this was a great conclusion to this third trilogy. So the first book in this trilogy was maybe my least favorite in the whole series, although it was still really good. Like, they're all fantastic. And then the second one I really loved, and this one was probably my favorite in this trilogy. So, I mean, it won't mean anything to you if you haven't been reading the series, but basically the main character in this particular trilogy and in the first one, Fitz, he needs to go with Prince Dutiful to this island where there's supposedly a dragon sleeping under the ice because Dutiful's promised bride-to-be has challenged him to give her this dragon's head in order to wed her. So that is what they set out on this journey to do. But the Fool, the other big character in the series, it's basically Fitz and the Fool are the biggest characters. He has a different agenda. He goes with them, but he wants to save the dragon because he says in order for the world to get on a better path, dragons need to be saved. Yeah, and I mean, Fitz and the Fool are very big characters in this series, and the Fool is known as this thing called the White Prophet, and therefore he kind of just knows certain things that need to happen to like set the world in a better track, a better like wheel of time or something, a better trajectory. And Fitz is his catalyst, so Fitz kind of like unknowingly sets into motion certain events that help change the world. So the two of them kind of change things, and they have been really big characters throughout the series. The second trilogy in this big series didn't really follow them as much, but they were still kind of present there in the background, we should say. Also, don't want to spoil anything, but in this series, they've really become very strong characters, and you can tell they're extremely important to this world. And this series is from Fitz's first-person perspective. Anyway, so yeah, this one was just a very great installment in this trilogy. I feel like there was lots of adventure, some more world building, fabulous character exploration. Yeah, so it was exciting these are like never too fast paced though. I feel like they're always well developed, and it's the characters are my favorite part of this series. And the world building is great too, but it's more slow and thought out, which maybe makes it seem more real. But the adventure quality was good to this. Yeah, the world building, we learned more about the Islanders in this one, and they have a matriarchal culture, which was different and kind of cool. And yeah, the characters, there were such good connections in this. And it was wonderful and also like heartbreaking, and just I became really invested in some of the character connections and whatnot in this book. And yeah, the whole thing about dragons was really interesting because dragons have sort of emerged in this series, but I thought maybe just because they're cool. But I liked what the Fool had to say about it, and hopefully I don't feel like this is too much of a spoiler, but I mean, don't listen for a second or something if you don't want to be spoiled. But the Fool says that dragons need to exist, not because they're going to save the world or really make it better, but because humans have kind of gotten out of check, and they think they control everything, and there's so much strife and so many problems because of all this, and they just fight each other and claim all this land and damage the earth and damage each other and those different from them, and they're just kind of out of control and think they're overly powerful. So they need some Creatures that are more powerful than them, and while majestic, kind of just as selfish and arrogant, to sort of put them in their place so that they don't run amok and kind of have reflected back to them what they're like, perhaps. I thought that was a really interesting reason to name dragons in the world again. Um, so that was kind of cool. Um, yeah, and and I just loved Fitz and the Fool in this one. I mean, I adore both Fitz and the Fool. The Fool is my favorite character, though, and just their relationship and how it's growing is so great and difficult, and I really can't talk about much. Um, yeah, and just Fitz's relationship with his children was interesting. Won't really say much more about that. And there was a lot about love in this too. I feel like this kind of love that kind of crosses all boundaries and kind of transcends everything and is very all encompassing and just kind of like the ideal, most pure love. And yeah, just boundary crossing doesn't really fit into anything and just is all encompassing, which is really beautiful. And two characters I think sort of have this love. I don't really know if they figured it out. Maybe they'll figure it out in future books. I hope so, because I got so just on edge wanting certain things. Yeah, but that was still a really like lovely type of love though to talk about. That's that, I don't know, unconditional, true, all encompassing, transcendent, um, boundary crossing. Yeah. So, anyways, so it's hard to talk about a book this far along in the series, but it was a great conclusion to this third trilogy. This third trilogy was great. Yeah, and just some wonderful stuff, and I really did enjoy this one in particular. There's two more series within this big series for me to read. So the next one is called The Rainwild Chronicles, and that one looks like it really heavily features dragons, but I don't know if it'll feature some of these characters as much. I know that Fitz and the Fool will definitely come back stronger in the last series, so we'll see what the next one's about. I'm taking a break for a few months because I've been reading a lot of these, but yeah, but this was great. And yeah, if you're looking for a great fantasy series, I mean, I recommend the whole realm of the Elderlings. So far, I'm loving it. It's a fantastic fantasy series, and yeah, and very character driven if you like your fantasy and your books to have some fabulous character relationships and development and all. Next book I read in July, I don't have a copy of. If I can figure out, maybe I will insert a picture. I've seen people do that. So if I can figure that out, you'll see that. If I did not, you won't. And so the next book I read, anyways, was a graphic novel, which is new for me. I've never read a graphic novel before. And it was Watchmen, which was written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons. And it was published in 1987. And I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I was astounded at how much I loved it and how much it impacted me. It was complex and there were a lot of layers to it. My love gave it to me, or lent it to me to read, so that's why I gave it back to him. So that's why I don't have a copy to show you. Yeah, and I think it's his favorite book, and he just thought I would get it, and I don't know, and I was open to it, but I didn't really think I'd love it that much. But he was really right. I did get it, and that was really cool. We were able to talk about it a lot and stuff. Anyways, so. Watchmen is set in like the 1980s, kind of maybe a slightly altered 1980s, so the threat of nuclear warfare and potential Armageddon is hanging over everybody, but superheroes actually exist in this world, and there's a group of them called the Watchmen, and but they're all very psychologically complex and kind of impacted by their past, and they have different viewpoints on saving the world, and none of them are perfect, and all of them are like morally incomplete, perhaps. And yes, there's a lot of exploration of these different characters, their past, their viewpoints, and different ways to save the world, but I feel like there isn't really any perfect answer that is reached. It brought up a lot of questions, which was cool. Um, yeah, so it's the characters that basically are so awesome, so I shall tell you about them. So there's one called Rorschach, and he's the most pessimistic of the bunch. He sees the worst in humanity. He's very pessimistic, almost like a nihilistic. Um, and I think he just doesn't see any hope for anything. But yet, somehow, even though he's that pessimistic, he still cannot stop fighting crime. So there's part of him that is still very compelled to fight crime. And then another character that sees more the pessimistic side of humanity is a guy named the Comedian, and he sees the worst in humanity, and he sees it all kind of as a big joke, and he kind of takes on these qualities and reflects it back at them, which was a very interesting concept, but because of that, he was my least favorite character. Um, and then there's an interesting character named Ozymandias. I think he's perhaps one of my favorites. He had some interesting points. He sees the world more optimistically, but he's the one that brings up the point that everybody, like, kind of seeing how the world is on this, like, breaking point. Everyone takes two sides, kind of a pessimistic or optimistic approach. There are those that see the potential for, like, enlightenment almost, and then there are those that just, it's almost like too much and they don't really want to deal with it, and they kind of almost would rather the world would end. So he kind of acknowledges that, but he takes a more optimistic approach. He sees a more utopian possible future for the world, and he wants to bring back to the world all that is good about humanity, such as, like, knowledge and the art and stuff like that. And he sees that the way to do this is because everyone just keeps dividing and fighting each other, and now it's going to lead to potentially mutually assured destruction. So he's got to stop everybody from fighting themselves. So he thinks that there needs to be I won't spoil what it is, but he thinks that there needs to be an outside threat for everybody to unite, which is sadly just kind of how humanity goes. They seem to always need an enemy. And so, but that's a pretty smart plan, but the problem is it's flawed because he has to, in his version of this plan, he has to sacrifice the few for the many, and so his idea for humanity is more optimistic and seems like a practical plan, but yet it's still morally incomplete. That's still not completely a right answer. Is it right to sacrifice the few for the many? It seems to make more sense, but is it completely right? And he also seems, while he's optimistic, he also seems kind of egotistical and, obviously wants to, like, feel important and rule the world in a way. So is that good? And he's the character that really brings a big point brought up in this book, which is, like, who watches the Watchmen, which kind of just, it's like, who has any right to determine the fate of humanity? Like, if superheroes existed and we have all these, like, superheroes that are very popular in our culture, like, do they really have the right to save humanity? Like, do policemen and the law have any right to make decisions on behalf of people? What about the government, politicians, etc.? So it kind of brings up all of that, and I know Alan Moore is known as an anarchist, and I could sort of see his anarchy seeping through with that question he brings up. Anyway, so Ozymandias was cool, but not perfect. And there's a character that I thought was really cool, and he's my favorite. A character called John, or Dr. Manhattan, and he's kind of the result of a science experiment gone wrong. So he was, like, entirely disintegrated, but somehow put himself back together, and because of that, now he has superpowers. I don't think the other ones really have true superpowers, but he does. And also his timelines have gone messed up, and he, like, experiences all time at once, which was super cool, and I loved learning about all that. And so some of his parts, because of that, were my favorite, and really got me questioning the nature of time and how time probably isn't linear, and what if everything's happening at once, and those sort of thoughts. Like, at one point I, like, had to put the book down reading it because I got, like, so caught up in that idea. So it kind of tripped me out in a good way. And his sections were just cool. He's someone that kind of wants to detach from humanity. And he goes to Mars for a while, and he kind of does become detached from it all, and he kind of questions whether, in the grand scheme of life in the universe, whether humanity is really important. and will keep it going. But then this one character named Lori kind of makes him realize the miracle that is life. And so then after that realization, he kind of like goes back and kind of wants to save it again. But then things just don't go as planned. He doesn't really know what to do, and he kind of leaves again. And yeah, just ends up kind of wanting to detach from it all. So he doesn't really do anything for the world. He kind of wants to detach from it. And it seems like he might long for a connection, but kind of ends up becoming detached from it instead. And on the opposite end of that, there's this character named Lori, and also this character named Night Owl kind of goes into that too. And I feel like they're more striven for connection the more that they see the world fall apart like this. Lori seems more driven to connection, and the more confused she gets about her past and sees all the death around her and just like maybe the fragility of life or something, she seems really striven to find love and connection. And so does Night Owl. He seems driven to connection, at least with Lori as well. But he kind of wants to fight crime, maybe for the more just personal reason, is that he can feel his age coming on, that he's becoming middle aged, and he feels kind of impotent, and fighting crime makes him feel important and alive again, and connecting with Lori makes him feel more connected. So there's just all these different viewpoints, and these characters are complex and interesting, and a lot about like when you see the world at this breaking point, like, are you optimistic or pessimistic? Are you striven to disconnect from it all or to connect more with others? And so there's a lot of that. And yeah, and there were no answers, but a lot of questions. And that big question about who watches the Watchmen, who has any right to make decisions on behalf of humanity. And it was just a really interesting book and just had a lot of layers to it. And there's even a part in the book, like, so there's the main story, but then there was like a guy reading a comic book, and then we get bits of that comic book within the comic book. And there was this one part that was really vivid and kind of just made sense of a lot of things, where this guy, he becomes shipwrecked on this island, and he's trying to make it back to his hometown because this ship that like represents hell or something is going to go and take everybody to hell. So he wants to make it back, and save everybody, but he can't like make a boat, but there's all these like dead corpses on the island, so he like ties them all together and makes a raft of corpses and like goes to save everybody from hell, but on the corpses. I feel like that made a lot of sense, especially like Ozymandias' plan, and just with war in general, how like trying to go to save people but on the corpses of other people, and how does that make any sense? I don't know. So just interesting imagery and interesting like layers in there. I haven't read another graphic novel, so like I really enjoyed the art style, but I can't really compare it to other things. My favorite palette was definitely like Dr. Manhattan when he was on Mars. I thought that was really beautiful. It's like this blue and pink palette, and it was just really simple, maybe because of the busyness of on Earth, and then like the simplicity in the space and being on Mars and the pink and the blue, and I just really liked those scenes artistically in particular. So anyways, it was a great read. I loved it. One of the best things I've read in a while, which super surprises me, and I really recommend it to everybody. There's a lot of depth to it. I'm glad to have finally read a graphic novel. Definitely want to check out more of Alan Moore's stuff. My love says that V for Vendetta is really good and one of his favorites as well, so I will have to read that at some point too. And he was so right that I would love it. Or he thought I would like it at least, but I did love it. So yeah, I'm glad he shared that with me. Read in July was Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, which was published in 1956. And I gave this 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, so I'm sure from my 2-star rating that you can tell that I didn't love this one. This was a bit disappointing. So this book kind of reinvents the myth of Psyche and Cupid. It tells it from one of Psyche's sisters' point of view, Arul, and Arul kind of has this possessive love of Psyche, kind of like a motherly love, and Psyche is sacrificed to this brute, which is really the god Cupid, because Ungit, or the goddess Venus, or Aphrodite, is jealous of her, and Erul kind of goes through all this stuff because of it. And this is kind of about how selfish human love can be, and kind of striving more to find beauty on the inside rather than the outside, and kind of like you have to become more godlike yourself before you can really connect to the divine, perhaps. So I love the myth of Cupid and Psyche. I don't know why it's stuck with me for a long time. I first came across it with the John Keats poem Ode to Psyche, which is really random. I went through like this weird John Keats phase when I was a teenager. And then I looked up the myth of Psyche and Cupid, and I thought it was really cool. So it stuck with me. And so when I heard there was a retelling, I was very curious, even though I've always had a bit of trepidation with C.S. Lewis, because I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was a kid. That was like from a completely childish standpoint, so I thought it was magical, and I liked it. And I didn't read into the religious meaning, but I know that C.S. Lewis is known as for being very Christian, and that's not my thing. So I've been worried about picking up his work, but this just sounded so interesting. But maybe I should have listened to that gut feeling a little bit. Yeah. So, the only character that really stood out was Erul. She wasn't that great, but she was interesting. She's born very ugly compared to her sister Psyche, and I expected that to be more like she was jealous of Psyche, but she wasn't. She actually loved her quite fiercely, but her love was so fierce that she maybe didn't really see what Psyche actually needed, and her love is actually quite selfish, because she doesn't think she deserves it in return. She kind of loves in such a way. I don't know, that's maybe not quite pure, unconditional, and it's just a bit selfish. And so, the most interesting thing this book showed was kind of how selfish human love can be, and kind of the downsides of it, and how when we get caught up in our own selfishness, we don't realize what the other person actually needs from us, which would be true love. So that was an interesting theme. Other than that, I don't know. I ended up with a very Christian message. I don't even remember it that much at this point, because it's kind of weird. Like, I think Cupid was supposed to be God or Jesus or something. Like, what? Because I don't know what about the myth of Psyche and Cupid is like, oh yes, that's a perfect myth to use to get across a Christian message. Like, said no one ever, except C.S. Lewis. So that was kind of weird. Yeah, I wished, to read more about Psyche and Cupid and all of that, of course. And then Venus that was another confusing point. Like, Ungit is what Venus is called in this, is really Erul herself, and I think it's because Venus is the god of love, and Erul's love, and trying to show that human love is flawed. And maybe the humans have more the pagan gods have more in common with human fallibility. And that's why you shouldn't believe in them, because you should strive to be more divine. Like the Christian God, I don't know, something like that, perhaps. Some of that stuff just goes over my head because I don't believe in it, and kind of, I get confused by it. Yeah. What else? I love the myth of Psyche and Cupid also for what it means for love, because, okay, so the general thing is, Cupid falls in love with, Venus is jealous of Psyche and sends Cupid to, put one of his arrows in her and make her fall in love with something hideous. But Cupid ends up striking himself because he thinks she's so beautiful. So they fall in love, but she is not allowed to see him. That's kind of the agreement with Venus. So he comes to her every night, but she never sees him. But then her sisters get jealous of her, which is maybe on what this book played on a bit. Probably because she has something good, and makes her mistrust him, and tells her to light a candle. And so she sees his face, and he gets mad, and Venus maybe doesn't allow them to be together, and Psyche has to go on this journey and complete certain tasks, ending with her going to the underworld. And then she kind of emerges from this journey, and she transcends and becomes the goddess of the soul, and gets to be with Cupid and gets to be goddess status. And so I feel like it has something to do with kind of going on a journey of love to gain depth, and to, make it more soul love versus superficial love. And she kind of goes on a personal journey and gains a lot of depth, and faces her own underworld, you could say, and stuff like that, and grows as a person and gains more soul, and then she's able to have love. And so I kind of like that message and that story, and how she becomes the goddess of the soul and kind of soul love, and somebody that has gone on their own journey and has able to have a deeper love. So I like that, but that wasn't touched on this much. So the myth has a great meaning of love too, but this just kind of had like the downfalls of human love, which was an interesting point, but it was kind of all over the place. The Christian message was weird. It was set in this fictional kingdom of Glome near ancient Greece. The setting was very unvivid and weird, and yeah, so it was just strange because of what it was used for, so that's why I didn't like it. And yeah, C.S. Lewis is definitely not for me. I don't need to agree with every author I read and their viewpoints and their religious viewpoints, but sometimes I feel like people's religious viewpoints, they don't seep in quite as much, but his definitely do, and I feel like he's kind of known for that, and maybe I should have I don't know, expected that. But yeah, so not too enjoyable. It reminded me though of how much I love the myth of Psyche and Cupid, and so it's always fun to revisit that and think about that. Yeah, so I didn't get too much from this. Don't really recommend it, especially if you're not religious. Like, you probably will just kind of be driven nuts. Yeah, and it wasn't very memorable, to be honest, and I wasn't very compelled to pick this up, which is probably why I read it slower than I should have. Anyway, so those were the 3 books I read in July. I mean, I mostly enjoyed it. I enjoyed wrapping up the Tawny Man trilogy. Watchmen was great. Yeah, that last book was whatever. I feel like, I guess I'm reading a decent amount, but I feel like I haven't read as much lately, but I don't know, just my brain is occupied elsewhere or something. Like, I have the time to, or I've had the time during the summer to read, but I don't know. Still enjoying it though. I did read some good books in August so far. I'm reading a really long one now, so which I probably won't finish, honestly, unless I like super. I don't know. I probably won't read that much this week. Let's be honest. But yeah, so I'll come back with my August wrap up soon. So if you read any of these books, have something to say, recommend to me, please feel free to comment below. I'll link Tumblr and Goodreads because I've been posting my written reviews on there for a long time. I write written reviews for every book. It's just what I like to do. I feel like reviewing books just like enhances my reading experience, both like written and in the video format. I don't know, like, I hope you all like it, but I definitely like it for my own reading experience and all of that, and that's why even when it's hard to film or I have like a hard time finding the space for it and whatnot, I still always like to come back to it because it just feels like it enhances things, and I feel like other people like it as well. Yeah, and I also have a Patreon account, which I'll link if you want to support me. I have a few patrons on there, which I just really appreciate. It's very kind of you to support me and my small little channel, and helps me buy books and all of that. Keep reading, keep reviewing things for all of you. So I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.